very cool rifle for you today. It's very special to me for a couple reasons. The first one is it was the very first firearm I purchased when I could, and secondly, it came from a good friend of mine, and it was his father's and his father's before that. And they used it for hunting. He's big into hunting. I didn't really get into it until my high school days. And of course, once I passed my certificate, him and his family had dozens of guns. And I said, listen man, I'd really like to buy one of your guns to go hunting. And he said, alright, well I got the perfect one. It was my grandfather's gun. And here it is. This is the Winchester Model 94. Made in 1894. You know, a lot of firearms get their name from the date they were made. And this one in particular is actually special for another reason. The serial number on the bottom is directly in correlation with the date they were made. And with these Model 94s, and I think a lot of Winchester guns in particular, they were made really well until about 1964, when Winchester decided to make some cuts and save some money, and they started making their guns a lot cheaper. This one, I checked the serial date on it, was actually made in 1952, so it's a very old gun as well. And you can definitely see its age. Most of my guns, if you've watched my other videos, I keep them very clean. I don't like to beat them up. I'm very careful with them, and I really don't take them hunting. And you can always tell a hunter's gun versus a target shooter's gun, because hunter's guns are beat up, they have blood stains on them, you know, you can tell they've been out in the woods and they've been used as a tool and not just as a toy. So this one, you know, has shows lots of signs of a gun that's been hunted many times. This gun in particular is chambered in a .32 Special. You could also get these guns in a .30-30, but Winchester wanted to make a bigger cartridge with a little more punch than the .30-30, and thus came the .32 Special. It never really caught on, just due to the lack of projectiles you could find for it and the lack of guns that would actually use it. So the .30-30 still remains a lot more popular to this day. The reason people bought the .32 Special was because Winchester actually said that cartridge had between 5 to 10% more power than the .30-30, and of course with a .32 caliber projectile, it had a lot bigger bullet hole as well. The gun is a lever action gun, which is still very smooth for being a 60-year-old gun. It works great. I've had it out to the range and shot, and it's still fairly accurate. I had a little bit of a hard time kind of sighting in where it shoots, but once I figured out and moved the back sights a little bit, I got it some pretty good groups.
Okay, so we're down the other end. We'll just take a look at the target here. I'll just kind of walk you through it. The first two down on the bottom here, those two were when I was shooting offhand, and that was the first couple I did when I first came out to the range. Then I started, you know, I realized they were low and kind of set up the bench rest to see if that made any difference. And those two over in the corner there turned out to be my next two shots. So I realized, you know, it was just shooting a bit low, and I changed the rear sight, lifted it up a little bit, and then it started working better. Those two up there were the next one. I knocked it back one more peg, and then those three in the middle were my last shots from the hay bale. So, you know, once I got it sighted in, you know, 2 inches between the last three shots, of course, you know, I did have it rested, so, you know, it's a little better. You know, shooting offhand, probably not as pretty, but it would certainly be a good bush gun to get that kind of grouping at 50 yards, just shooting off the iron sights. So nothing wrong with that. Definitely a solid gun, and I'm fairly happy with those results just from shooting with the iron sights.
Being an old gun, there is no safety on it. It does have a half cock, which is, you know, kind of a safety, but at the same time, you'd really rather, instead of dealing with the hammer and the trigger, you'd probably rather have some sort of a push safety or something, you know, that's a little better than that, because sometimes, you know, your finger can slip. So safety obviously wasn't of the utmost importance in 1894, but we've come a long way since then. The way you load the rifle is from the side. There's a tube magazine on the end, which is why with the .32 Special they're always a round nose, and you'll never find a tipped .32 Special. That is because if you're ever out in the woods with a tipped and they run a nose to tail, like you see right here, if you happen to trip over a massive root or even a little root, whatever you trip over, if you drop your gun and you have a pointed round, you know, if you have a pointed end on one of these, You're asking for a disaster. So, the 32 Special you'll always find had the round nose. When you put your last one in the magazine, the door will close on the side, and then you know you're ready to go. And of course, to load it, all you gotta do is just rack the lever, and off you go. Most times when I do a review on a gun, I do like to say a few bad things about the gun, and just, it can't always be all roses and daisies. And, I'm really having a hard time finding something mean to say about this gun, because it's just great. And I mean, for a really old gun that still works very well, there's not much bad I can say about it. The only thing I'm not 100,000% happy with is I'm not a big fan of the sights. There's a very, very small front sight, and the back sights are this big, almost like a U-shaped thing. And lining it up is, it's not particularly perfect. You could get a side-mounted scope, but of course, when you pull the lever, the ejection is on the top, so you couldn't have your scope directly on top of the gun because it wouldn't eject properly. Another thing that was on the pre-64 models of this gun was the steel butt plate, which is pretty popular in a lot of old firearms. Military surplus, you find generally they weren't very kind to people's shoulders back then. They didn't really care so much about how much you beat in your shoulder. It's only recently that all these guns have these big, cushy, comfy rubber buttstock ends on them. Back when, they just put that steel in the shoulder and let her rip. So comfortable, not especially, but it does the trick. As far as being a compact, portable, lightweight, well-shooting, repeating rifle, this would be the ultimate hunting rifle out there. As a bush gun, if you're just out for a nice walk or doing some tracking, this would be the greatest thing to carry around. I haven't actually gone hunting with this one in particular, but it has been hunted many times, that is for sure. You can tell it's had its time. Lots of dings and scratches, but it just gives it character. A lot of my guns, I hate it when I get any sort of ding or mark on them, but they don't have any story to them. They're just the firearm that I use. This one has a story, and the marks just give it character. So that's what makes it a very cool gun, a special one to me. And you should definitely, if you ever come across one, pick up one of these Winchester Model 94s, the ultimate repeating rifle.